Today, we are going to be talking about an artist who shares my passion for 133 and has done a number of her own work inspired by 133, history, medieval art, and all sorts of other sources that we'll be interested in talking about. This artist works both with digital mediums and analog mediums. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce everyone to the artist behind Blade and Swords, Betty from Austria. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi.
Welcome aboard. All right, so tell us how you started getting into painting and art.
Um, well, I started painting when I was little already. So I just painted everything that was happening to me or was happening at home or in school and how I perceived my surrounding. And I would say it helped me to deal with everything around me.
Hmm.
Like others are maybe writing diaries, and I painted diaries. So it's just my kind of medium to deal with things and express feelings, I would say. So
So tell us a little bit about more about your art. Are you an artist professionally? Is Blade and Swords your main design work?
well, I would say I'm semi-professional because I have no diploma in art studies yet. I'm currently looking for school to make a diploma in art. Um, we will see when it's possible to do. And yeah, it's my main work. Originally, I graduated from computer sciences and economics. But as I said, I paint since I can remember and continuously educated myself in that. And when I got really sick after my bachelor studies, I had to quit my job where I did this computer science stuff, and I decided to focus more on a painting. And then I started with Blade and Swords in 2018. Yeah.
Between you joining HEMA and starting Blade and Swords, was it what did Blade and Swords come first? Did HEMA come first?
HEMA came first. I mean, painting I was all the time when I was just my medium. But when HEMA came into my life and it turned out to be more than just a hobby because it's really my life passion, I was thinking about, okay, what are you doing next? Because this disease I got really took me into a situation where I have to decide something in my life
Hmm.
really fundamentally. Do I want to go back to an office or do you want to do something else? But to be honest, if you are on a point where you already died, you decide for something you eventually really want to do. And what I
Right.
really wanted to do, what I really wanted to do is painting and HEMA, and this is why I combine it. But I didn't know about HEMA before 2016.
Hmm.
So it was after that when I decided to combine both together. Yeah.
And was there a general interest in swords, from movies, video games, before that?
Well, I was always really interested in history and swords, of course, because I really love to go into the woods and play with sticks on
Sure.
with other kids, playing, being the knight or something. I never wanted to be the princess, to be honest. I always wanted to be the knight that is rescuing or whatever.
Sure.
So I had this interest, of course, and also with this history and read a lot about that history stuff. And as I said, I didn't even know that this kind of sport existed. It's just randomly Googled about medieval or what I always did about history. And then I got over this historical European martial arts and I was really interested. And I first was at a club in at my country, but I switched then to another club in Graz. And that club is 630 kilometers away from my place. And I was so addicted about this martial art that I traveled, I think, every third or fourth week to Graz. I stayed there 2 weeks just to train and came back to my home place. And honestly, you don't do that for just a hobby. It really it's I couldn't live without it anymore. So I can say it's my life passion.
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
I think since a couple of months there is a group in Freiburg. I also do HEMA now. So I'm now in Graz and another group at the moment.
Very cool. Not so funny enough, I also started HEMA in 2016.
Ah,
I
okay.
was coming off of, I was just about to graduate college. I did a triathlon and cross country through like high school and college, and I just knew I couldn't dedicate myself to training like that anymore when I eventually get a job. So I'm like, I want to find a sport that's totally different than what my current sports are, so I don't compare myself to the past. And I stumbled on HEMA and was like, well, I love swords. I've played a lot of Legend of Zelda. I like
Yeah,
history.
me too.
Let's try it. And from there that's kind of all she wrote. I went to a club down in Killeen, Texas. Eventually I got a job and joined a club where I was working, and really haven't looked back since. I think there's a lot of listeners who will resonate with the, yeah, I thought this was going to be just a hobby too, and
Yeah.
here I am with 50 swords in my garage. So can you tell us about some of the different styles of work that people can find of yours?
Well, I do a lot. I mean, what I offer is very broad. I do logos, digital art. I do coat of arms, either digitally or tempera or with other kind of mediums. Illustration for books. So it's very broad what I offer.
Hmm.
I just say it's just for HEMA and history interested people, but I'm really open to everything regarding art. I mean,
Sure. Do you do you try different paints, charcoal?
yeah, of
Um,
course,
okay.
a lot. Uh, I try a lot, but what I'm really interested in is learning the old techniques. I
Hmm.
really want to know how to paint tempera paintings better, how to do medieval illumination. So the school I'm looking for to do an art diploma, um, I also wanted to offer this kind of knowledge. That is not that easy, because it's really somehow extinct knowledge, and maybe people working as, I don't know the English word, restorators, or who are just doing the old stuff,
Right,
making
like
it
who's trying to
better.
recreate in the style that they did at the time.
Yeah, and what I'm really interested is using the old technique.
Mhm.
So with the pigments and gold leaves and everything, that is what I try a lot, but eventually I think I somehow have to learn it. It's not an art you can just learn yourself.
Well, so
That
I
is what
think
an
that's
art.
a really good point to kind of touch
Yeah,
on a little bit, where I think a lot of people look at, older manuscripts, 133 as being a great example, and they see a very simple art style, especially when we compare it to what we see in like the Renaissance and going forward. But there was a lot of work and effort put into that art as
it
well.
definitely was a lot of work and very costly because only the color blue was extraordinary hard to just get from the ultramarine. What is the stone? Just
And it's
insane.
even, I mean, it's even more impressive when you think about, how colorful it really was back then,
Yeah, how bright and colorful. Just the Pope was the most richest or highest person. So he had the most precious colors. And yeah, there is blue in the Tower of
So I actually stumbled on your art just as like a hashtag HEMA on Instagram, and it was showcasing one of your pieces of two rabbits fencing in the style of 133. And
Yeah.
I loved it. I was all for it. I love the blending of the modern styles and the medieval manuscript inspirations, and it really stuck out to me. Can you tell us more about this piece?
It's just I love medieval rabbits, when I just randomly looking at medieval books and had not that much clue, I found these rabbits and I saw them and I was I instantly fell in love somehow because it's so hilarious to make an innocent, cute animal like a rabbit and to a violent creature somehow. Is this mixture of cuteness and violence what makes them really funny and appealing somehow? And I think these medieval artists were really like the cartoonists of their time somehow. I mean, they also put snails or other animals in really funny positions, but I somehow just love the rabbits. So, also, I don't know if you know the movie Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Yep.
Where this scene is where this little rabbit is coming out of the cave, and you first have no clue what is happening, and this actually is the dangerous creature, and all the bones are lying in front of the cave, and then this rabbit is killing almost everybody, and I was this is one of my favorite scenes, really.
Yeah, yes, like the sword and buckler if you underestimate it
Yeah.
at your own risk.
And it's just because I like them so much, and it's even in my logo. I put out a rabbit in my logo.
Mhm.
I love to make them play a role in fencing books, in portrayed as fencing masters. Somehow like to invade the world of HEMA with medieval rabbits somehow. It's just I love to do that.
No,
This is
absolutely. And
why
I always love those deep dives people will try to do to explain like why a snail is in a manuscript or why a rabbit's in a manuscript. And I think you kind of touched on it of sometimes it's just the simplest answer of they thought it was funny and they included it.
Yeah, I was reading about a little bit about the medieval rabbit history, but it's really mainly to be depicted as a cartoonist style. So yeah, of course, medieval people had humor, and
Right. We didn't invent it with
yeah,
TikTok.
yeah, and did it, yeah, yeah, and sometimes these thoughts just coming in my head. I think it would be really funny to make the medieval rabbits in the Tower of Eichbuch. It would be really funny to make Fiore Delivery as medieval rabbit. It's just everything is funnier with these rabbits somehow to me.
No, absolutely. And I mean, being a very simple person, right? Scrolling through Instagram and seeing rabbit sword fighting, I'm like, I'm in. This is
Yeah, I
awesome.
know. I think it's awesome too. That is why I'm totally addicted to medieval rabbits.
Well,
Yeah, I
and that's
must admit
so
that.
that's what really impressed me about your art was, yeah, obviously starting on the springboard of medieval rabbits. And then I was like, well, I want to know more about this artist. Started doing a little more digging. And you have some very in-depth art as well. It's not all just cartoonist style. Another one of your pieces that really impressed me was your Eva piece. Just the details, the coloring of it. Can you tell us a little bit more about that one as well?
Of course, this is one piece I made. I think it's one of the earlier artworks I did when I started with digital drawing, and it was basically for a friend of mine who it's her with her sword and fencing jacket, but of course hers is not blue. But I just found it really interesting to paint it in this charcoal style
Hmm.
and do a lot of details in it. It just the thing is, sometimes I don't think about what will be the outcome because this was not a commission. It was just I wanted to do something for her, and then I just made it. And during mating, it developed, so to speak. I did not had that complete plan before I painted it, so it developed with doing it.
Oh,
And
that's
I
interesting.
thought,
So you kind
okay,
of had an
okay,
idea, and then as it was developing, you just kind of let it build on itself.
yeah, somehow, because I thought, yeah, maybe, yeah, blue is nice, and then I put more details in it, and I put more details on that, and then it just came out like this. So some works I really have to plan, of course, especially if it's commission work, then I have to plan it and have to sketch first and talk with the person. Is that somehow going into the direction you want? But this was for friends, so was just coming out of myself during the process.
Well, it really shows your level of commitment and care and kind of passion behind this type of work. So we've talked about HEMA, we've talked about art. Now let's talk about some of our favorite works in HEMA, that includes some art. What got you interested in 133?
Um, well, apart from that, we use it in our training for sword and buckler next to Lignitzer, but 133 was the main source for our training.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an interesting and awesome book. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Yeah.
and it's so separated from a lot of our other sources, you know?
I
It's a
mean,
different art style in many ways. It's written in Latin, which we don't see as
yeah,
much.
it's I mean the Tower Fechtbuch is it's just awesome because it's the oldest known fencing treatise for European martial arts. It's written around 1300th century, beginning 1400th century, I think. So this book is somehow one of the real proof that actually a fencing system existed back then in the high and late medieval ages, and that not that is not was not just that people are randomly wielding their swords around or whatever. Um, to me, it's really interesting because it's so early. There are no earlier sources yet. It's even before Lichtenauer's Saddle and also before Talhofer or Fiore Liveri, of course. So it's just the oldest fencing treatise for European martial arts. Just I think it's awesome.
Well, and for me, what I really like about it, and it's something you come across a ton in history, is you realize, you know, these people from those times, they're very similar to us, right? They're thinking about how do I do this? They're trying to think about how do I communicate it? We do similar things. We might have different tools, we might have different mediums, but you know, the idea of preserving these ideas, how do we record them? You know, they were thinking about that as well. There's kind of that social aspect to it. Um,
Yeah, sure. I mean, why this book was written, you can only speculate about it because nobody will ever know.
right.
But if you study the Tower Fechtbuch, you see that it's not only for sportive education, because there might be some books only for the sake of sportive or whatever. But the terms they use in the Tower Fechtbuch is thrust, and also in the I think in the 28th play they talk about you can either stab or touch the opponent
Mhm.
softly. So it's more kind of like of an effective combat system and not just doing it for fun, I would say.
Right, right. Yeah, there's some and you know sections where it's like enter without mercy. You're like, well, I
Yeah,
like to
yeah,
show my
exactly.
friends mercy, you know?
Yeah, I mean, at that time also fencing was also just made for fun. It was not only for combat or self-defense or whatever. People also did it just for sportive motivation. But this book is clearly not only for sportive things. I mean,
Right. Well, and you
uh,
know, we see that today. How many I'm sure as a kid you picked up a stick and that became your Excalibur, you know? So,
exactly.
you know, that it's just universe swords are fun. They agreed, we agree. Um, now, of course, one of the best features of 133, and I think you can speak to a little more personally than me. Let's talk about Walpurgis and what she means to you.
Well, I think this is just the coolest part of the Tower of Ekbuch to me, that there actually is a woman or girl in this book that is doing a fencing techniques, a fencing technique. So it's not just a portray of a holy women person or I don't know a royal person. She's actually doing a technique. And I was thinking about it. How is this possible? I mean, it's the medieval times, and how is this possible? But the Taufech was written in an age where a lot of social changes were going on. What means that nobles and knights lost more and more influence, and the cities became more powerful, and also their inhabitants, like craft people. Um, And at this time, also the first schools for secular education started to emerge, because before only the clerical people had access to education, and it was, of course, all in Latin. I mean, Tower is still in Latin, but it's at this point of changing somehow, and the scholastic education took place in cathedral schools, and from these cathedral schools, universities developed. So Tower, it's speculated that it was written in a cathedral school from this priest Luitger, and they call him priest. What is another maybe hint that it's not a monastery? So he was more in contact with people, and at that time, not only clergy people had could go into cathedral schools, but also
Right. Yeah. We're starting to see the collection of ideas. Just like you and I, if this is written in a cathedral and they're learning from that, they're not just
and
learning swordsmanship. They're studying like math and
it was
science as well.
because cathedral schools were kind of a school. Yeah, they had different subjects, and it seems they also had fencing. And I was thinking, okay, if this is a school at a time where the middle class is uprising and gaining more influence.
Well, and
Sorry,
there's only so much we can speculate about 133 because unfortunately we don't really have an author on it. It doesn't say outright why
I
it
mean,
exists.
it's not that impossible that also a girl is attending.
Right. Well, and it's interesting too, because there's been research about who is Walpurgis, and it's unfortunately we may never know, but
Yeah, we will never know. I mean, you can speculate a lot who she were, and I was thinking about her also a lot. About the age, I was thinking, for example, because some artists painted her as an adult woman, but as it takes place probably in a cathedral school, and her hair is open, and at the time, girls with open hair were mainly unmarried.
Mhm.
So to me, it's more like a teenager than an adult woman. And yeah,
Well,
if
and
you
kind of
look at
based
the
on her clothing, a lot of people
yeah,
speculate
if you
she
look
had wealth.
if you look at the clothes, it's just that she's of course coming from a really healthy household. And yeah, she could be a schooler of the school, because women were actually at that time also allowed to have education. It's not like the general public has the view on women in medieval
Mhm.
times. At that time, as I said, with the uprising or the coming up of the urban middle class, also women were more and more able to get education. And it's also very important for, if you have money, it would be just stupid to not educate the women
Right.
to
Well,
to also
running
run the
households, running
business. Yeah, to also
businesses.
run the business.
Right.
I mean, there were even a woman who was really influential with running a bank in the medieval times,
Mhm.
lending money.
Well, and
to,
I think that really highlights something of this isn't just a character who's included in the manuscript. Of course, we don't know who she is, we don't know what the purpose is,
no,
but she has a
yeah.
technique named after her, and that's noteworthy. It's a it's a special second guard that she gets named after her, which is pretty
Yeah,
remarkable.
it is. I mean, maybe she was the daughter of a sponsor from the book, because making a book was still expensive, painting and everything. But it's just speculation.
And
But
of course, she means a lot to modern HEMA practitioners because unfortunately we do see people who say, "Well, women didn't sword fight at the time." It's like, well, actually, here's 133, and
yeah, and it's really a shame that it's so unknown, because especially nowadays, everybody is somehow, I mean, looking for strong women. Also, the the Viking scene, or I don't know how to say that.
Yeah,
People are
yeah, no.
interested in that. They really look a lot for they daring to find a fighting women, you know. And I always think, well, you look at these graves and whatever, and here you have this manuscript with this woman fencing. And I cannot believe why this Tower Fact book is so rarely known in the
Right.
public. I mean, general.
And as somebody who grew up with three sisters, I can assure you they've all beaten me up in their own unique ways. So uh, along 133 lines and our love of it, you have dedicated a tremendous amount of time into a book you've just produced that's a translation and an interpretation of the system. Would you like to talk a little bit about Ultima Custodia?
Well, Ultima Custodia, I can say it in very briefly. It's a new translation of the Tower Fact book from Middle Latin to German or English. It is an interpretation of the techniques from the Tower Fact book. It's just the interpretation from the Sword and Buckler group at my club. We gathered this knowledge about over years, and then I saw all this stuff we wrote down, and I was thinking, why don't we make something out of it, you know? I mean, just another interpretation does not mean that this is the only one. I know that there are a lot of other awesome interpretations out there, but I just thought it would be cool to combine my artwork and the interpretation. And so it's also an art book, because I did not only paintings for the sake of understanding the context, but also just to please the eyes of the reader, I would say.
No, absolutely. And some of the art you have included in this is just remarkable. And it's really fun to kind of see because the book also includes the images from the manuscript itself and going from those pages to your interpretation pages where you draw out the flow of the fight, or you've just added pieces of art as well that people can just appreciate. It's not just an interpretation book, it's not just a translations book, it's also an art book, and it's a real showcase of your work and kind of dedication to all this. Now, there's some work that looks like it's a scan of like some of your charcoal paintings, and then there's some work that looks like it might be sketch, might be digital. Do you feature both your digital and analog work in this book?
Yeah, it's a mixture. It's a mixture. And I just wanted to make it interesting, not using only digital art, but the cover, for example, is pencil painting I did.
Mhm.
So it's mixtured mediums.
There are sections where there are two fencers, one of them wearing a hat that looks eerily like a
It's
hat
me.
you own.
It's me.
Were those hand drawn or were those digital?
These are digital
Okay.
drawn, yeah. And I mean, there are these two kind of illustrations that can be distinguished between, as I said, illustrations that support the understanding of the context,
Mhm.
and the others to put an aesthetical value. The one I did to support understanding, I was really thinking a lot how to highlight what is important, because in other fencing books I had this problem with really seeing what is really going on, even if I had the text from the photography. It was not always easy to see, and then I decided to paint, for example, the techniques in ego perspective. But I did this kind of sketching style and only painted the hands and the weapons in colors to somehow get the reader's eye to what is important.
Mhm.
So there is some thoughts behind why I just did only sketches, also for Custodia, for example, or how to hold the sword. I wanted to really highlight what is important and not add too much stuff that is not important, so that it's easy to follow and understand.
Right. It's kind of,
Um,
it's simple, but it's simple for the sake of having you focus on the details that matter.
yeah, Exactly. And I think I've never saw illustrations in ego perspective in a fencing book so far. So this is somehow, I think it's helpful to understand.
Right. No, absolutely. Right. Because, we try to interpret the system that's very two-dimensional, and we don't get the scope in some aspects. So being able to see it even from like you have shots where it's almost from like the fencer's view of where their
Yeah.
hand should be placed for a technique while looking at the opponent.
Yeah, this is the ego perspective I'm talking about.
Right.
All the techniques are from, like, if you have a camera on your head painted,
Right.
so that you really see from yourself where is the sword going and what is going on now.
Well, and it looks like you've put a lot of emphasis on the hand positioning as well, which I think a lot of people struggle with in the 133 manuscript of, what are the hands really doing? Because
Yeah.
they were limited by the medium they were trying to illustrate it in.
Yeah, they even somehow illustrate it really funny that you think, how is this anatomically even possible?
Right.
I mean, it's a tower Facebook, I think.
No, absolutely. So bringing some of those aspects into a more modern view for your interpretation, I think it will go a long way. Of course, there are rabbits in 133 gear, which is a huge bonus for me.
This
No,
is
it
just because
really
I
is
love the rabbits,
it really is an impressive work. I received mine. I'm still going through it. I plan to do a review of it as well. I've just been
Thank
blown away at
you.
the level of dedication and real heart you've put into this work as well.
Yeah, thanks.
This is a labor of love, no doubt.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I also made interpretations of the protagonists of the Tower of Vechko. I mean, the Luitka Scholaris. We don't
Mhm.
know if it's only one scholar or more. They just call it Scholaris most of the time. And Walpurgis. And I wanted to paint them, somehow interpret them to how could they have been looked like. Just for adding, as I said, aesthetical value to the work, because otherwise it's quite a rational topic. And I like this mixture of this combination of a fencing treatise, translation, and an art book. I just love this idea, and then did that. Yeah.
No, absolutely, and it recently came available for people. There will be links below, so people can see this work and get their hands on it, because it really is remarkable on how much effort and love. The art in it is a fantastic showcase of your work, and both digital and analog, and some of the discussions we've had today. It highlights your understanding of a system, your breakdown of it, and kind of your approach to interpreting the system. And on top of all of that, for people who are getting into 133, you don't just have an interpretation, you don't just have art, you have a translation as well. As part of this book, you went through the effort of getting all of the art licensed from Royal Armories. So
Yeah.
when people buy your book, they are really getting you know a cookbook, for lack of a better term, of how to 133. They'll have a translation, they'll have your interpretation of it, they'll have the art as well to keep the reader engaged at every step. It really is impressive, and I hope
Yeah.
you and Michael are both very proud of the work you've done there.
Thank you. But I really want to say it's not my interpretation. I mean, it's my artwork, and yeah, I did also translation with my best friend, but the interpretation is based on the work of the whole group. I can't do an interpretation myself. I would never. No, this is the knowledge. Of course, we wrote it, but the knowledge is based on a whole group from the interpretation, so it's not mine. I just wanted to say that it's not
Talented
mine.
and humble, and this is why people should invest in your
It's
work as
not mine.
well. So I really appreciate you taking the time and talking through all this, showcasing some of your stuff. Where can people find your art? What what can they find out there of yours? And If there's anything else you want to say to our viewers before we wrap up, this is your time.
Well, I would say my art is on my website. I don't know, should I say it?
Yeah, why not?
www.bladeandsource.com, and there is some pieces of my art. It's also where you can buy the book in German or English. I also have a link on a link tree on it where are all these because I also make shirts, t-shirts with HEMA or history motifs. I mean, it's made from Amazon, but I make the designs and also have a spreadshirt shop. Yeah, and generally I'm open for commissions for logo or coat of arms, and I'm just open to everything that is related to HEMA because I just love it. So I
Perfect.
would say my website is the center to get everywhere if someone is interested even in my work.
Perfect. Now, and I'll be sure to include links in the description, links in the blog, really just highlighting, and I hope everyone hears like the level of passion and work that goes behind all of this through this interview. Betty, it's been a real pleasure talking with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk through 133, art history, and everything in between. So thank you very much.
Thank you too. It was a pleasure.